Hello and welcome. I want to congratulate you for being accepted into the next Physical Therapist Assistant program here at Colby Community College. My name is Kent McChristian. I'm an instructor here. I'm also a physical therapist. Autumn and I created this program to assist students coming into this program to help them with study techniques, to help them be successful. This program is both challenging and intense. Over the next year, you'll be required to remember a large amount of information and learn it quickly. As a general rule, you'll need to spend at least 1 to 2 hours of studying for each hour that you're in class. Additionally, you'll need to develop good study habits that most importantly work for you. In this presentation, I'll discuss some bad study techniques, followed by some good ones, then go over a few memorization techniques. Now, bad study habits. Most of the bad study habits, basically you are doing things without thinking about it. You're not processing it. You're just kind of going through the motions. So this includes writing everything down in class. Simply put, mindlessly copying everything that is said in class is a poor use of time. So instead, when you're listening, try to process the information and write down the key points. On the right-hand side, there's a diagram, and this is a visual technique for taking notes. There are lots of different techniques. For taking notes. We'll show a few of them. One that I often see students do is recopying their notes word for word. Once again, without thinking about it, this isn't a good use of your time. So instead, try to read your notes, process the information, and then kind of write down a summary of what you read. And make sure that this makes sense to you. On the right-hand side, this is the Cornell note-taking method, where they divide the page into different columns where they write down summaries or main ideas. Once again, it's just one technique. Here's one that I unfortunately was doing my first year in grad school, and this is where you're reading, and then 20 minutes, an hour later, you don't really remember anything you read. So once again, try to process the information you read, and then write a summary of it. You can also try and think up test questions from the material you're reading. Brute force memorization. This is where you don't really know any of the information you're remembering, you're just remembering it. So not only is this not very effective for memory, but it's also not going to help you in the clinic. So for example, instead of memorizing IFC, which is interferential current, high frequency is 80 to 150 megahertz. Instead, remember that IFC 80 to 150 is used for pain control, like with a patient with a low back. This kind of goes without saying, but I felt it was important to put in here. Don't pull out all-nighters. Sleep obviously is important for your brain to work and will help process short to long-term memory. Additionally, the amount of information you'll be required to recall for the tests, you probably won't be able to memorize it all in one night. Now I move on to good study techniques. So first of all, set up a study schedule. We'll cover this in a later presentation. And just to reiterate again, it's recommended that you spend at least 1 to 2 hours of studying for each hour you're in class. Setting up a study schedule, I feel, is really important at first. Number one, it helps prioritize your time and make sure that you're studying enough, studying all your classes, and not let any test surprise you. So for example, when you know a test is a week away, you can start preparing accordingly. Now, just with the bad techniques or study habits, you're not processing the information. With the good study habits, you're processing the information. So this is purposeful note-taking. So for instance, when you're taking notes in class, just don't write everything down that is said. Instead, try to process the information in a meaningful way. So for example, when listening to a lecture on a shoulder, you could write shoulder, RTC, stabilized ball and sock, tear equals pain and instability. So I've done a couple things here. One, I've summarized it and it's very short. Two, I've used an acronym, which is RTC. I'll cover this a little bit later, which is the rotator cuff. And then also I didn't write all the letters of a word. And this makes things go faster, but it also helps you process the information. So in long form, what this says is that the shoulder, or the rotator cuff in the shoulder, helps stabilize the ball and socket. When you have a tear, you're going to have pain and instability. And once again, by writing down just the crucial elements, you're processing the information, which will help you remember them later. Now, you can make abbreviations like what is RTC, or just don't write the entire word. And this helps you increase your note-taking speed. But make sure that you can remember your abbreviations. Occasionally, I've had the unfortunate thing that you go back to my notes and I abbreviated things so much that I didn't know what I was talking about. Now here we move to purposeful reading. So reading with a purpose helps you remember. A technique I often use is look in the back of the chapter for questions, and then you flip to the front of the chapter, you read until you find that question, then go back for another question, and so on. If the book doesn't have questions in the back, you can kind of scan the bold type of each section header or pictures, kind of make up your own questions to answer when you're reading. If you study with a partner or a group, you can also quiz each other about what you just read. I really like using note cards. Everybody's different, but just like when taking notes in class, when you're making note cards, don't just copy your notes word for word or out of the book word for word. Instead, try to summarize the information. This processing helps you remember and apply the information. Another technique you can use is flip the note cards over so you read the kind of summary on the back and try to recall what's on the front. There are many online resources for making note cards. StudyStack.com is one, which is nice because when one of you makes them, or you can all contribute, and then everybody can share and use the same note card. As a general, repetition is a key for memory. So here are a couple techniques that are useful to increase the number of times that you've reviewed your information. One that I like is reviewing what you went over that day. So even if you have to study another subject or have a test, just take a small amount of time to review what was covered in class that day. And then also another one is reviewing your notes or your note cards right before bed. So there's some research to suggest that sleeping helps convert short to long-term memory. And it also is another way to just increase the number of times that you've repeated something. Now here's before a test. Particularly in undergrad, I would just kind of roll out of bed and come to the test. But obviously this isn't going to get you the best grades. I think getting up early, reviewing your notes, prioritizing information, if you had a difficult time remembering something, can be very helpful for the test. And then also you can quiz each other before the test. Try to think of potential test questions and quiz each other. This is, I think, a particularly helpful technique. It also makes you review the information again. However, this technique isn't quite as helpful early in the study process when you don't know the information as well. But I think it's a great option right before a test. Now, after a test, this I think is very helpful because make sure and review the test and what you got right and what you got wrong. Basically, it's good feedback. Sometimes you think you'll answer the question right, and it's actually wrong, or sometimes it's wrong and you're actually right. So this gives you feedback. Additionally, it will provide the questions on tests often appear, or those concepts will appear on future tests or on the final. So it helps you with that as well. And just kind of in summary of the good study habits here, we have make sure and take full advantage of your class and lab time. So this is your time to practice, ask questions, and learn. If you're messing around in lab and you're really just kind of wasting your time. It's the same thing in class. If you pay attention and ask questions, this is repetition. It helps get things in your brain. So make sure and take full advantage of that time. We have just a couple of memory techniques, as mentioned before with the rotator cuff. So an acronym, if you're not familiar, is just using the first letter of each item to help you memorize it. So for example, one we often use is SITS, which is for the rotator cuff muscles, which stands for supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. And on the right, we have some Twitter lingo if you need any help with that. Another one I like to use is visualize and associate. So what this is you create a visual image or words that sound alike. So for example, if you don't know what the word for stomach muscles are, it's the abdominals. So we have the abdominals on that guy's stomach look absolutely awesome. So here we're using words that kind of sound alike, have the first couple letters alike, and you're creating a visual image at the same time to help you learn. Next we have his hamstrings are so big they look like a huge piece of ham hanging off the back of his legs. So here we are creating a visual image, like a piece of ham. It's on the back of his legs, which is the muscle on the back of his legs. And just to finish, we have a few online resources that are helpful. Kahoot! Is something that it's a learning game. We'll be using that in class some. As mentioned before, StudyStack is a note card program. ZygoBody is an anatomy website. It has a kind of like a cadaver where you can remove the skin, the muscles, get down to the bone, and it also identifies when you hover over it with your mouse. So that can be helpful for anatomy. And then just kind of in summary here, YouTube has many good resources, but you need to make sure that they're correct and then it's relevant to the program. And we'll be going over this in class some as well. So a few that I enjoy are Mike Reinold, Eric Dalton, Brent Bookbush, and Crash Course. So those are a few if you want to check out those. They're physical therapists or manual therapists, and then Crash Course has some study techniques for